The courtroom was supposed to be a place of justice, but for her it became a stage for humiliation. As the judge mocked her tears, no one imagined the power behind the doors about to swing open. What entered next would shake the court, expose lies, and change everything forever. The courtroom was buzzing with the low hum of conversations, the scratch of pens, and the soft shuffle of papers. In the middle of the chaos sat a young black woman, her shoulders trembling as she clutched the frayed strap of her purse. Her name was Alicia Freeman, and she felt as though every eye in the room burned holes into her skin. She had never been in a courtroom before, at least not as a defendant. Today, she was fighting not only for her dignity, but also for the roof over her head. Alicia's story was not one of malice or crime. She had fallen behind on rent after losing her job as a nurse's assistant, caring for patients until her hospital had made layoffs during budget cuts. The landlord, a man known for targeting tenants of color with unfair fees and evictions, had wasted no time dragging her to court. What Alicia expected was fairness, a chance to plead her case. What she didn't expect was ridicule. At the bench sat Judge Raymond Collins, a man in his 60s with thinning gray hair slicked back, a reputation for being tough, and a smirk that rarely disappeared. To the courtroom regulars, he was feared for his sharp tongue. To Alicia, he was quickly becoming a nightmare. As her attorney stumbled through a few points about her payment plan proposal, Alicia's eyes welled with tears. She tried to keep her composure, but the weight of being belittled, targeted, and now facing homelessness pressed heavily on her chest. A sob escaped her lips. The judge chuckled. The sound was small at first, a low rumble of amusement that made Alicia look up in shock. She thought she misheard. But then, in front of the packed courtroom, Judge Collins leaned back in his chair and laughed. "Really? Crying?" He scoffed loudly, his voice booming through the speakers. "Ms. Freeman, this is a court of law, not a soap opera audition. Save your tears for someone who cares." A ripple of muffled laughter spread through the courtroom audience. Some covered their mouths. Others stared at Alicia with pity. She felt the floor tilt beneath her, shame rushing hot to her cheeks. Her attorney looked stunned but said nothing. He was young, inexperienced, and clearly intimidated by the judge's mocking tone. Alicia wanted to scream, to defend herself, to say that she had worked double shifts to take care of others, that she had never once been late on rent until the hospital cut her hours, that she wasn't irresponsible, just human. But the judge wasn't finished. "You know," Collins continued, smirking, "this city has far too many people who think the world owes them something. Maybe if you spent less time crying and more time working, you wouldn't be in this mess." The words hit Alicia like blows. She bit her lip so hard she tasted blood. The courtroom blurred as tears streamed freely now, no longer under her control. Her hands shook. She felt naked, humiliated, stripped of her dignity in front of strangers. And then came the gavel. "Motion denied," the judge declared, slamming it down. "Eviction order stands. Sheriff will enforce it within 10 days. Court is adjourned." The bang of the gavel echoed like a death knell. Alicia gasped, her body trembling as if she'd been struck. She had lost her home. Worse, she had lost it with laughter ringing in her ears. People began to shuffle out of the courtroom. Some glanced back at her, shaking their heads, whispering. Others looked away, embarrassed for her. Alicia sat frozen in her chair, unable to move, her tears dripping onto the papers in her lap. The judge rose from his seat, gathering his robe around him with an air of superiority. As he descended the bench, he passed near Alicia and muttered just loud enough for her to hear, "Pathetic." The word carved itself into her soul. Her attorney put a timid hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry, Ms. Freeman. We can appeal, but it's tough. Judge Collins rarely changes his rulings." His voice was thin, unconvincing. Alicia managed a nod, though she barely heard him. Her mind was numb. She staggered out into the courthouse hallway, the world around her a blur of marble walls and echoing footsteps. She felt small, invisible, yet exposed at the same time. She wanted to disappear. But then, the heavy wooden doors at the far end of the hall swung open with force. The sound reverberated through the corridor, causing heads to turn, and in walked a figure that made the air in the courthouse shift. A tall man in a tailored navy suit strode confidently inside. His presence alone commanded respect. Broad shoulders, polished shoes clicking against the floor, and eyes sharp with determination. Behind him trailed two others. One, a woman in a crisp black pantsuit carrying a briefcase, and the other, a man in a dark uniform with insignia gleaming on his chest. The tall man's gaze locked instantly onto Alicia, and in that moment, her trembling slowed. Recognition flickered in her eyes. The courtroom bullies, the smirking judge, the landlord who thought he had won, all of them had no idea who was about to step into the battlefield with her. Because the man who had just walked in was not only family, but someone with power strong enough to turn the entire case upside down. The tall man's stride was purposeful, unhurried yet commanding enough that the entire hallway seemed to pause in his presence. Conversations halted, footsteps slowed, and eyes turned. Alicia blinked through her tears, barely believing what she was seeing. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice trembling. Marcus Freeman, her older brother, hadn't been home in years. The last she heard, he had moved to Washington, D.C., climbing high in the federal government. She had never told him about her struggles. Her pride wouldn't allow it. She didn't want him to think she was weak, that she had failed at life while he succeeded. But here he was, standing in the very courthouse where she had just been mocked and stripped of her dignity. His expression softened when he saw her, but his eyes darkened with controlled fury as they shifted toward the courtroom doors. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He could see her blotchy cheeks, the streaks of tears, the shaking of her hands. Marcus had always been protective of his little sister. Seeing her like this was enough to ignite a storm inside him. The woman at his side leaned toward him, whispering something, and handed him a file from her briefcase. The man in uniform followed closely, his posture stiff and alert. Marcus placed a steadying hand on Alicia's shoulder. "You don't have to say a word," he murmured. "I already know enough." Alicia's lips trembled. He laughed at me," she managed, choking on the humiliation. "The judge, he said I was pathetic." Marcus's jaw tightened. His sister's pain cut deeper than any political battle he had ever fought. He bent slightly, forcing her to look at him. "You are not pathetic, Alicia. You never were. And you're not alone anymore." Before Alicia could respond, Marcus straightened to his full height and turned toward the double doors of the courtroom. Without hesitation, he pushed them open and walked inside. His companions followed. The room, which had just begun emptying after the judge's ruling, froze. The sight of Marcus Freeman entering was enough to cause whispers to ripple through the benches. Some recognized him immediately. Others only sensed that he was someone important. His tailored suit, the woman with the briefcase, the decorated officer, everything about him screamed authority. Judge Collins, halfway to his chambers, turned at the commotion. His eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice echoing in irritation. "This court is adjourned." Marcus walked straight to the center of the courtroom without flinching. He didn't raise his voice, but every word carried the weight of steel. "My name is Marcus Freeman," he said, pulling out a leather identification folder and holding it high. "Deputy Director of the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Collins faltered, his smirk slipping for the first time that day. The woman with Marcus stepped forward, producing documents. "Sir," Marcus continued, "I am here under federal authority to review judicial conduct complaints within this district. And from what I just witnessed," his eyes cut toward Alicia, then back at Collins, "this courtroom may be in violation of multiple civil rights protections, including equal treatment under the law." Collins scoffed, attempting to recover his composure. "This is highly irregular. If you have complaints, they should be filed through proper—" Marcus interrupted smoothly, his tone sharper than a blade. "Do not lecture me on procedure, Judge. I helped write the very guidelines you're supposed to follow." The courtroom was dead silent. Even the landlord, who had been smirking moments before, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The officer behind Marcus stepped forward, his uniform glinting. "This court," Marcus continued, "will not dismiss a tenant's rights case while mocking her, belittling her, and laughing at her tears. That is conduct unbecoming of any judge, let alone one sworn to uphold justice." Collins's face reddened. "You have no authority to override my ruling." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps not directly, but I do have authority to launch a formal investigation into judicial misconduct. And let me be clear, Judge Collins, if I find that you have displayed bias, racial prejudice, or abuse of power, you could be removed from this bench permanently." The weight of the statement hung in the air like a hammer. The audience murmured. A clerk shifted nervously. Even the bailiff looked uneasy. Collins straightened, trying to reclaim control. "This is outrageous. You come into my courtroom threatening me, undermining the rule of law." Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice but increasing its intensity. "The rule of law is exactly what I'm protecting. The law does not permit you to humiliate defendants. The law does not permit you to treat poor black women like they're beneath you. And the law certainly does not permit you to laugh in the face of justice." Alicia sat at the defense table, staring in awe. Her brother wasn't just speaking for her, he was speaking for every person who had ever been mocked, silenced, or dismissed. The landlord finally rose, his voice shaky. "Judge Collins already ruled. The eviction stands. This woman hasn't paid her rent in months." Marcus turned his gaze on him, cold and unyielding. "And who are you?" I'm the landlord," the man stammered. Marcus motioned to the woman beside him, who immediately opened the file she carried. "Funny. Because according to city housing records, you've been investigated multiple times for predatory practices, inflated rent fees, harassment, and unlawful evictions, particularly targeting tenants of color. Am I correct?" The landlord's face drained of color. He sputtered, That's irrelevant. She hasn't paid." Marcus took a slow step closer. "It is entirely relevant. You exploit vulnerable tenants, then rely on complicit judges to rubber stamp your evictions. That ends today." The courtroom buzzed louder now, whispers flying. Collins banged his gavel furiously. "Order! I will not have this circus in my courtroom." But the sound no longer carried authority. Not when Marcus Freeman was standing there, unwavering. The officer with him finally spoke, his voice crisp. "For the record, Judge Collins, I am Captain Daniel Ruiz of the U.S. Marshals Service. Deputy Director Freeman's presence here is fully authorized. If necessary, I will escort you to chambers for questioning." Collins froze. His own bailiff shifted uncomfortably, glancing between him and Ruiz. For the first time, Collins seemed smaller, his dominance eroded by the presence of true power. Marcus turned to Alicia, his voice softened. "Stand up, Alicia." Her knees trembled, but she obeyed, rising slowly. Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her back. "This case is not over," Marcus declared, addressing the room. "I am filing an emergency injunction against this eviction until a proper review is conducted. My team will gather evidence of misconduct, both from this landlord and this court, and rest assured, there will be consequences." The room erupted in gasps. Some applauded quietly. Quickly silenced by the gavel, Collins continued to slam in vain. Alicia's tears still streamed, but now they were mixed with relief. For the first time all day, she felt hope. The judge glared at Marcus, his pride wounded. "You think you can walk in here and dictate my courtroom? You have no idea what you're starting." Marcus leaned in, his eyes piercing. "On the contrary, Judge, I know exactly what I'm starting. It's called accountability. Something this courthouse has been avoiding for far too long." Silence followed. Collins's jaw clenched, but he said nothing more. He turned sharply, his robe swirling, and stormed out through his chamber doors. The landlord quickly followed, muttering under his breath, his confidence shattered. The spectators whispered among themselves, some nodding in approval, others wide-eyed at the spectacle they had just witnessed. Marcus finally turned back to Alicia, softening once again. He cupped her shoulder. "It's going to be okay now," he said gently. "They're not going to get away with this." Alicia's lips trembled. "Marcus, I didn't want to bother you. I thought I had to fight this alone." Marcus shook his head firmly. "You never have to fight alone. Not while I'm here." The words settled into her heart like an anchor, grounding her. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe. But Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The battle wasn't over. Judge Collins wasn't the type to back down easily, and men like Alicia's landlord didn't stop exploiting just because they were caught once. The real fight was about to begin, and Marcus intended to bring the full weight of the Department of Justice with him. The courthouse seemed quieter after Judge Collins stormed out, but Marcus knew silence did not mean surrender. Men like Collins clung to power like a drowning man clutched driftwood. Exposing him would not be easy. Still, Marcus was not here to make friends. He was here to make things right. He led Alicia out of the courtroom, his arm steady around her shoulders. She still felt weak, but the weight pressing on her chest had begun to lift. She glanced at the woman who accompanied Marcus, curious about her role. "This is Elena Park, my senior legal counsel," Marcus explained as they walked down the marble corridor. "She'll be handling your case directly. Everything Judge Collins dismissed, we're reopening it under federal review." Elena smiled warmly at Alicia. "We'll need every document you have, lease agreements, receipts, letters from the landlord. Don't worry if you don't have it all. We've already started pulling his records. He has a pattern, and patterns tell the truth." Alicia nodded, her voice soft. "Thank you." They entered a conference room nearby, where Captain Ruiz stood guard by the door. Marcus sat across from his sister, his expression serious now. "Listen carefully, Alicia. What happened today wasn't just about rent. Collins laughed at you because he thought you were powerless. He's been doing this to countless people, most of them black, poor, or both. That stops now. But I need your courage. Are you with me?" Alicia swallowed hard. She thought of the judge's laughter, the humiliation that burned through her. Then she looked at Marcus, her brother who had come back like a shield between her and the world. "Yes," she said firmly, "I'm with you." Marcus gave a small nod, pride flickering in his eyes. "Good. Because this fight won't just save your home, it might save hundreds more." The investigation. Within days, Marcus's team launched a quiet but thorough inquiry. Elena coordinated with civil rights attorneys, pulling case files from Collins's courtroom. Patterns emerged quickly: an unusually high eviction rate against minority tenants, disproportionately harsh rulings against defendants of color, and countless complaints from attorneys who had been too afraid to escalate them. Meanwhile, the landlord's records painted an even uglier picture. Inflated late fees, repairs ignored for months, and targeted harassment, especially of single mothers and elderly tenants. Alicia wasn't his first victim, just the latest. Alicia helped where she could, providing her receipts and recounting her experiences. But most of the time, she watched in awe as Marcus worked late into the night, strategizing, gathering witnesses, and preparing a case that would not only overturn her eviction, but expose systemic corruption. At first, she worried she was a burden, pulling him away from his important job in Washington. But one evening, as she apologized, Marcus stopped her with a stern look. "Don't ever say that," he told her. "My job is to protect people like you. If I can't defend my own sister, then I've failed at everything." Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude. The return to court. 2 weeks later, the case returned to court, though not to Judge Collins's bench. Collins, under investigation, had been forced to recuse himself. The state had assigned Judge Meredith Hayes, a fair-minded jurist with a reputation for integrity. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread about what happened, and community members filled the benches in support of Alicia. Some carried signs outside the courthouse demanding justice, others simply came to watch history unfold. Alicia sat at the defense table beside Elena, her hands trembling but her head held high. Marcus sat directly behind her, his presence an unspoken wall of strength. Judge Hayes entered, her gavel striking firmly. "This court is now in session. We are here to review the eviction case of Freeman versus Randall Properties, as well as matters pertaining to potential judicial misconduct." The landlord shifted nervously at his table, his attorney whispering frantically in his ear. He looked less smug than before, his eyes darting toward Marcus every few seconds. Elena rose first, her voice calm but razor-sharp. "Your Honor, we intend to show that my client, Alicia Freeman, was subjected to unlawful treatment in this court. Treatment rooted not in law, but in bias. We will also demonstrate a clear pattern of predatory practices by the landlord, Mr. Randall, and evidence of judicial misconduct by Judge Collins, now under federal review." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Judge Hayes raised a hand, silencing them, then nodded. "Proceed." The testimonies. Witness after witness took the stand. Former tenants recounted harassment, surprise inspections, and threats from Randall when they couldn't pay inflated fees. One elderly woman described how she was locked out of her apartment for 2 days after missing a single rent payment. A single mother broke down in tears as she described moving her children into a shelter after Collins ruled against her in less than 5 minutes. Then came the court clerks. One brave woman testified that Collins frequently mocked defendants behind closed doors, often targeting black litigants. Another admitted she had been ordered to lose certain documents that might have helped tenants' cases. The evidence was overwhelming. Randall's attorney tried to object, claiming these stories were irrelevant to Alicia's case, but Judge Hayes shut him down. Patterns of misconduct are highly relevant when they reveal intent, she ruled. Finally, Alicia herself took the stand. Her hands shook as she recounted the day Collins laughed at her. She described the humiliation, the hopelessness she felt as the entire courtroom turned against her. Her voice broke, but she forced herself to continue. "He called me pathetic," she said softly, her eyes shining with tears. "But I'm not pathetic. I worked hard all my life. I only fell behind because the hospital cut my hours. I didn't ask for pity, I asked for fairness. And instead, I was laughed at." Silence fell heavy over the courtroom. Even the landlord shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet her gaze. Marcus's eyes glistened with pride as he watched his sister reclaim her voice. The verdict. After hours of testimony, Judge Hayes finally spoke. Her voice was steady, deliberate. "This court finds substantial evidence that Ms. Freeman's eviction was not handled with impartiality. The conduct displayed by Judge Collins, as well as the predatory practices of Mr. Randall, raised serious concerns." She turned to Alicia. "Ms. Freeman, your eviction is hereby overturned. You will not lose your home. Furthermore, all back fees claimed by the landlord are waived." Alicia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Tears spilled freely, but this time they were tears of joy. Judge Hayes wasn't finished. She looked toward Randall. "Mr. Randall, based on testimony and evidence, this court refers your practices to the State Attorney General for investigation into housing discrimination and fraud. You may also face civil penalties for your conduct." Randall's face turned ashen. His attorney slumped back in defeat. Finally, Hayes addressed the elephant in the room. "As for Judge Collins, this court acknowledges the federal investigation into his conduct. Should those findings confirm what has been presented here, I will personally petition for his removal from the bench." The gavel struck. "Case closed." The courtroom erupted. Some spectators cheered, others clapped, though bailiffs quickly tried to quiet them. Alicia collapsed into her chair, sobbing into her hands, overwhelmed with relief. Marcus leaned forward, resting his hands gently on her shoulders. "You did it," he whispered. "You stood tall." She turned and threw her arms around him, hugging him tightly. "No, we did it," she said through her tears. The aftermath. News of the case spread quickly. Local papers ran headlines about corruption in the courthouse, and community leaders demanded broader investigations. Soon, other tenants came forward, emboldened by Alicia's courage and Marcus's intervention. Collins, facing mounting pressure and federal review, resigned within weeks. Randall was charged with multiple violations and eventually forced to sell his properties. For Alicia, life slowly returned to normal, though nothing would ever be the same. She kept her apartment, but she also found something greater: her voice, her dignity, her strength. One evening, as she and Marcus sat on her small balcony, watching the city lights twinkle, she finally asked him the question that had been on her mind. "Why did you come that day? You didn't even know I was in court." Marcus smiled faintly. "I had a tip," he admitted. "Someone from the courthouse reached out. They said a woman named Freeman was being humiliated in open court. I knew immediately it had to be you." Alicia's chest tightened. Fate, it seemed, had stepped in at just the right moment. She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Thank you, Marcus, for saving me." He shook his head gently. "You saved yourself. I just reminded the world who you really are." The city buzzed around them, but in that moment, Alicia felt a peace she hadn't known in years. She wasn't just a tenant, or a victim, or a defendant. She was a survivor, and she had a brother and a community who would never let her fight alone again. In a world full of noise, We follow the quiet truth stories that reveal, awaken, and transform. If this story moved you, like, comment, and subscribe for more untold narratives that challenge perception and stir the soul. Hit the bell so you never miss when the compass points us to the next hidden truth. This is Hidden Compass Stories, where every story leads somewhere deeper.